Okay, so at COP26, what do you want to tell people?
I want to tell people to build a better future for themselves and everyone else.
I'm tired of hearing people talk about climate change again and again and again and not putting anything into action.
So I drive all electric, we have solar panels and at home and we run on 100% renewable energy.
At COP, I would like people to actually make a difference and put their words into actions rather than just talking about the situation.
I wish that everyone could be a bit more sustainable. There would be more wildlife and animals that could just wander around.
I want the future to be a cleaner and better place.
Climate change threatens to touch all aspects of our lives, and in this very, very special episode we're going to take a look at how high-emitting transportation can change for the better. We're going to talk to a handful of young people about their hopes, dreams and fears for the years to come. In fact, we've asked them to start writing their questions for us and our experts to answer. But first, we turn back the clock, back to when the UK's energy system was unrecognisable, and we don't have to turn it back that far. A mere decade ago, the electricity supply in the UK heavily relied on hugely inefficient, highly polluting coal-fired power stations. Not only have we reduced total energy usage by around a sixth in that time, in the same decade, wind and solar have come to contribute more than 25% of our power. This gives us great hope that in the next decade it will bring about an even bigger swing towards sources of renewable energy aided and abetted by batteries. Soberingly though, the electricity system is the low-hanging fruit and easier to change. When it comes to transportation, heating and heavy industry, there is still a long way to go. In the UK, we're already partway through this huge transformation, and by 2025, the UK will have 8 gigawatts of interconnector capacity to Norway, Denmark, France, the Netherlands and Belgium. These channel-crossing transmission cables are estimated to prevent around 100 million tonnes of CO2 emissions between now and 2030. What's more, in the UK, our electricity system operator has committed to operate Great Britain's electricity network carbon-free by 2025. And of course, the UK is already the world leader in offshore wind. In 2020, offshore wind powered the equivalent of around 15 million homes. This is around 15% of all electricity generated. By 2030, this could be as much as 50%. On electric vehicles, we estimate that the cost of the network of 50 charging sites would be between 500 million and £1 billion. Now that might sound like a lot, but it's the equivalent to 66 pence per car per year over the lifetime of the assets. And transporting people is an essential piece of the puzzle. Presently, transporting people and goods is responsible for around 28% of the UK's carbon emissions. That's 126 million tonnes of CO2. Join us as we speak to some truly amazing young people, those for whom all our actions now are of profound importance as we try to limit global heating. So I'm very pleased to welcome 4 wonderful young people who have some really interesting and challenging questions for us. So, young people, please step into the ring. And joining them, I really want to welcome our team of experts who have very kindly volunteered to answer their questions. So guys, step into the ring, please. Excellent. Now, we've gone through all the questions and paired them up together. So, let's get on with it.
What is the national grid?
What is the national grid? The national grid, well, firstly, we don't make electricity, we don't buy electricity, we don't sell electricity. That's what people think we do. What we actually do is move power from where it's made to where it's consumed, right? So where we make it, so historically that was like coal and gas-fired power stations in the middle of the country, but we're now taking the wires to the coast, to the seaside, because people are building offshore wind farms. We're also taking our wires to the coast and we're building cables to other countries so we can share electricity. Cool. So we are really just the pipe. If you in liquid terms, we're the pipes to allow the energy in water to flow.
How much of our electricity is renewable and why isn't it all of the electricity we have?
Oh, so it varies at different times of the day. So actually, let me pause for a minute. Let's go back a little bit. So up until about 2017, the dirtiest thing we did as a country was make electricity, right? But when we went from 2017 into 2018, we actually generated more power from clean sources than from burning stuff, right? So it changes over time. The other thing, it changes of time of the day and seasons of the year. So middle of a sunny day, generate quite a lot of solar. But when we have a really, those beautiful blue still days, not a lot of wind. So the problem is it's very difficult to say how much, because it changes every half hour throughout the day and through each season. But roughly, right about now, about 50% of the energy right this very minute is being generated from clean sources. Now, when we count clean sources, we include nuclear. Some do, some don't. It's clean at the point at which it's being made. It's a bit dirty to make, but it's clean in its use. So at the moment, we're about halfway there. There are times when it's a bit dirty, so high pressure, high demand days, gas is doing the heavy lifting. But what we're actually planning on doing is being able to operate the grid clean for a small period of time from 2025, but getting better all the way to 2050.
What do you suspect the future of transport will look like, especially in cities?
I think that's a really broad question. I believe that it will be electric. There's a huge kind of transition which is happening now, and this will be kind of progressing over the coming decade. And I think slowly and slowly all the vehicles will become electric. First all the smaller ones, and then kind of as we go along, kind of buses and larger vehicles as well. I also think that there is a place for things like autonomy. It is already helping many vehicles kind of drive safer, but there will be kind of more and more functions that I think autonomous vehicles will be able to take on. And I think one of the key things that all cities are trying to do is really just to reduce the number of vehicles in city centres and in urban centres, and to make sure that people are actually using their foot, or they are cycling or walking or using public transport really.
And in terms of increasing the use of public transport then, how do you think the UK could improve on this? Because, for example, there's a city in Brazil called Curitiba, and when people use public transport, they give them vouchers for fruit and veg to spend, so they're incentivising them to use those systems. What do you think we could do in the UK to incentivise people to stop driving and to start using the buses and the trains that we've got available?
A lot of this kind of change when it happens is when people move to a new home. So I think what we need to make sure is that when people are moving from one place to another, there are very kind of easy ways for them to actually access kind of wherever they want to go by public transport. So it could be kind of when you change jobs or when you move a house, kind of when you are kind of basically mapping your transport options, you actually have really good kind of public transport modes and kind of very simple, few changes and very fast options for you to get there. I think we can also try and make sure that we identify all the areas where public transport is currently not working, kind of often kind of at night or in kind of certain kind of less busy, more residential areas. And I think kind of smaller transits like smaller buses, mini buses, and maybe kind of some autonomous vehicles in the future that are able to kind of access kind of smaller streets and kind of pick up only a few people to then take them to kind of transport hubs is what we're gonna see in the future.
What year do you reckon all the fuel cars will be gone?
Ooh, This is a really good question, because let's assume that nothing happens apart from we have a ban in 2030. Then by that logic, if the average car is around your age, maybe a little bit older, those cars will start to be replaced from about 2029. So by that logic, we would start to see a decrease in petrol and diesel vehicles by about late 2030s. But there are a ton of other things happening at the same time. We're seeing that people are understanding that electric vehicles are much, much cheaper to run, that petrol is getting more expensive. We're seeing new houses being built with charging infrastructure. We're seeing more charging infrastructure generally. So some of those anxieties that people have around, can they make the switch to electric vehicles and does it support their lifestyle? People are starting to be really reassured. And so some of those buying behaviours are actually sort of being accelerated. And so we might see a ban, or we might see no petrol and diesel vehicles much, much sooner. I'm not sure when an exact answer is, and I'd love to have a crystal ball to tell you an exact answer, but let's say late 2030s.
What is the future of rapid charging in the UK?
Oh, right, the future of rapid charging. So, firstly, most people thought early on that everybody would charge at home, but not everybody can.
Right, yeah.
In the same way, those who were arguing that home charging was the only answer said, well, you'll kill batteries if you charge them quickly. Mm-hmm. What we're starting to see now is there's no magic bullet, you need a bit of both. Those who can charge at home will. Those who can't charge at home may charge at the office or the supermarket. Yeah. But the one thing you need to have an EV as your first and only car is confidence. Confidence you can go further than the range of the car, confidence that charging won't inhibit your journey.
Okay.
And that's why, although it's not the magic bullet, high power en route charging is going to be really critical, because of what it will do is give you confidence. So what you're observing though, and I think it's a really interesting point to pick up, is if you think about it, for my entire lifetime, energy's been done to me, right? Mm-hmm. I don't see where I use it and waste it. I get a bill at the end of the month. It's a page of numbers I don't understand, and I have to pay a pain point. You have to write a check at the end.
Yeah.
What you're observing is the ability to democratize energy. Yeah. You can make it yourself. You can choose when you use it. You can store it. You can sell it back to the grid. So that democratization piece, I think, is really interesting, because none of us have been able to participate in the energy system before, and you're actually demonstrating participation. Yeah. So that, for me, is really exciting, that democratization of energy.
Are electric vehicles suitable for young people?
Well, the short answer is obviously an overwhelming yes, they absolutely are. But I think if you start to look at it a little bit more closely, young people generally might be on a bit of a tighter budget, maybe they're a student, and I certainly remember a time where I would fill up my car with £2.50 worth of petrol. However, £2.50, petrol-wise, that might get me 10 miles. In an electric vehicle, that could be your entire tank. Mm-hmm. So from a cost of ownership and how much that represents of your budget, absolutely a perfect vehicle. But those are the things that we can sort of really understand in terms of the difference that they make to your personal wallet. But actually we can start to see the broader implications, things like better improvements to health, greater productivity through more improved air quality, and those things which are kind of invisible but will manifest in the economy and in years to come show that these are clearly a great choice for young drivers. And all drivers, in fact.
Well, that's it. But going back to your first point about your £2.50 on fuel, my fuel price never really changes. It's always going to be below £5 to fully charge my car, and I can do as much driving as I like, and I don't have to worry about spending a fortune in fuel. Whereas my friends who are driving petrol and diesel cars, for some reason I'm always the designated driver because it doesn't cost me anything. So it's obviously I've got a much larger investment to put out. I mean, I paid £5,000 for a used Renault Zoe. For a first car, it's quite a lot of money. But once I paid that, I was fuel free, maintenance free. It works out a lot cheaper in the long run for me.
Why are there not many electric options with planes, buses and trains and things like that?
I think that's a good question, and I think that's kind of partly linked to just timing. So I think there is a lot of development that has been happening with electrification, with vehicles. If you look at it like 10, 15 years ago, there were very, very few options, even in vehicles. By now, there are quite a number of them. I think there is a little bit of just a progression really for the technology to fit into some of the more kind of complex vehicles. So buses just need kind of much more energy to move around, and therefore they need kind of much bigger battery packs, but then they are kind of get very heavy. So there's just technology needs to basically kind of catch up with the use cases. So I think kind of as we go along, we will see kind of lots of batteries kind of being in. I mean, there are already some buses. We have been working with refuse collection vehicles, which are kind of the very complicated ones, because they carry all the waste from households, but they are also able to now run on batteries. And I think it's going to kind of move forward to other technologies. In terms of airplanes, I think for smaller aircraft, it will be possible for them to just carry the batteries around. But the energy density for now of the batteries is not really sufficient yet to go kind of long distances, kind of for the very long international flights. They're just basically too heavy for a plane to just carry them around. Kind of as planes fly, fuel gets consumed, but batteries don't. So they kind of keep there on the airplane and keep them heavy. I think that's where some of the kind of new technologies will have to be developed to make sure that long distance flight.
We talk about sustainability a lot, and one of my key questions is how can we ensure that less economically developed communities aren't left behind both in practice and in policy?
It's a really important question, and it's part of the root of the problem, because one of the things we see in the world today is that there have been societies which for various reasons have got hold of technology first, and they kind of shoot off ahead, take all the benefits and leave a lot of people behind. And that has a lot of problems. It's unfair, it generates resentment, it generates distrust. And fundamentally, we live on one planet and we share this planet. Like whatever your politics, we have one planet and we're all on it. And so you can't operate in a way which just splits society. And so when it comes to involving communities, the problem I think the world has is that there is a lot of focus on changing big systems, and the people who can change big systems are the people with the existing power and money in the world. But the quickest way to do it is to just get on with it. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that quicker decisions involve fewer voices. And the challenge for the world is that we have to make sure all the voices are heard. Everyone's got to be on board with this project. But we still need to get things done quickly, and that's the trade-off. It's not that, in principle, it's easy to include everyone, but it takes time. And I think that we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice because, more than anything, I mean, the issues of climate change are about many things. They involve responsibility for a planet and how we choose to live our lives. But more than anything else, they're about social justice. We don't choose to be born, but we can choose how we live our lives, and we are all citizens of this planet. And so it matters that we take time to have these debates, and there are no easy answers. I can't tell you that there is a method that works perfectly in the time we have available. But I think what does need to happen is that the nations that do currently have the power and the money need to take responsibility for listening, and they need to accept that they have benefited from the current system enormously in ways they don't appreciate, and that they only have to give a little bit to let everyone else come up with them.
In 2080, when I'm retired, what would the world look like if we keep on going how we're going?
So I'm hesitant to answer this question because the answer is not pretty. In 2080, if we don't change anything about how the world looks at the moment, the world's coral reefs, for example, will be dead. They will be surviving in fragments in some places, but all those beautiful, rich areas of biodiversity, the ocean doesn't have to warm very much for corals to die. So there won't be coral reefs if we carry on as we are by 2080. Other things that will not look good, so if we carry on as we are, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will be, well above 500, and that, parts per million. And what that does is, it doesn't just affect the way Earth works now, it locks in warming for a long time to come. So the world would be warmer. Now, it's not all about, we go out on a cold day and it's a bit warmer, so that's a bit nicer. If you add extra energy to the Earth system, what it does is it changes global weather patterns. So it shifts where the big storms happen, it shifts where you get lots of rain, it shifts where you get lots of drought. And the difficulty with that is that our human systems assume that the rain happens here, so we put farms here, and that the winds happen like this, so we put our trade routes there. And so the weather could move, but our roads and our transport networks and our farms won't move, so they'll all be in the wrong places. So that means that it'll be harder to grow food, it'll be harder to transport it around. It'll be a really expensive process basically of shifting systems to meet that new weather. One of the other things that will happen if we carry on as we are is that because it will become harder to grow food because of drought and rain, because the weather will have gone wrong, that brings with it a human cost of humans not being able to live in the environment that they have been. So there are already countries at the moment where either because of sea level rise or because of famine, people are moving, they're becoming refugees when they don't want to be because they can't live on the land that they're on. So there'll be a lot of people moving, and that's hard for the people moving. It's also hard for the people in the places where they want to go because they've got to find extra room and they've got to fit these people in. So and we're also looking at a huge loss of biodiversity just in terms of the range of animals that are on Earth, because all of that makes one big system, right? We're all one big organic engine together. You and I are part of the world, we're not separate from it. And so we'll be losing bits of that system that is part of us. So the problem is, I don't want to scare you, but the answer's terrifying.
Let's talk about influence, because how do we influence people to want to travel more sustainably? And the first example that pops to my mind is Boris Johnson flying to the G7 summit from London to Cornwall. And he was ridiculed in so many newspapers, and I heard so many people saying, well, if he can fly everywhere, why can't I?
Yep.
If he drives a diesel car, why should I change? Because he's telling us we need to be sustainable. Put those words into action.
Yeah.
What do you say?
So
because it's a really tough argument.
It's a great challenge. So I'm a firm believer in show by doing. Mm-hmm. Okay, I shouldn't be telling you what you should do. If I do it, then I can show you how I benefit. I guess my nearest analogy is I remember a world before iPhones, right? And you didn't think you needed an iPhone because you didn't know what you didn't know. Mm-hmm. And when somebody got one, they showed it to you, and you go, well, I want to do that. So in the same way, leaders, thought leaders, capitalists, people of influence do, show by doing, explain that it can be done, and then that puts you on a better platform to persuade others to at least experience and try the same thing. Mm-hmm. I do appreciate the challenge though, is if you are, I'm not trying to get Boris out of jail here, but in a past life I built £500 million worth of wind farms. Mm-hmm. My time was very precious, and so I would often fly to Scotland, which is where I was building my wind farms, for the purpose of trying to build a wind farm. Now, if you took the view of I was flying, bad, but if by flying I was generating £500 million worth of wind farms, good. Mm-hmm. So overall, are you focusing on the short term or the long term? You don't know whether Boris was negotiating a peace deal or who knows. But yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think we all need to take responsibility for how we show up. And it's very difficult to ask people to do something if you're not prepared to show and do yourself. So I take this personally, true. Right? So I drive an electric car. Mm-hmm. I use ground source heat pumps to heat my home. I buy clean electricity. I even treat all my own wastewater from my home. So the only environmental impact from the place that I live is I expel clean water. From my perspective, that means that I can speak with experience, but also I'm not preaching and telling you something I'm not prepared to do myself. Yeah. But I appreciate that I'm an early adopter, and I probably paid a premium for that. But if I can do it, then it should help others to do. And as the technology evolves, it should get cheaper per unit, which will help bring other people along for the journey.
What do you think the government should be doing now?
The government needs to set the path. I think there's two ways that things work. There's lots of people like you and me who are just on the ground, and we can make our own decisions about what we do, and that gets lots of things done, and that's really important. But what a government can do is something different, is it can organise lots of people, and it can go from the top of the system, and it can kind of give everyone a direction, but importantly it can also clear the path. And I think there's a lot of things to do with climate now where people sort of are thinking about the right things to do, but they just someone needs to make a clear decision, we're going that way and we're all going to do that. And that's what the government needs to do. It needs to make that path clear. We've got these problems to solve, we're all going that way, and then everyone can get on with it together.
Well, it's been incredible to talk to the next generation about our generation. It's critically important that we look through their eyes. What will the world look like by 2050 if we don't act now? I mean, some of us might not be here, sort of me probably, but they will. It's really important. We are in an emergency, so isn't the resource that we really, really need to worry about, above all else, time? So, there we go, that's it. If you have been, thank you for watching.
And if you have been,
If you have been,
If you have been,
If you have been,
thank you for watching.
thank you for watching.
thank you for watching.
thank you for watching.